live.
Good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to the Pillar 4 Committee meeting for AIB today. I am Hope McGuire, the chair of the committee, and I will make sure that we introduce ourselves today as it is the start of 2025, and we might have new people who are engaging around Pillar 4 work. I will pass it to the vice chair. I just will explain, I am currently the supervisor of community schools in Montgomery County Public Schools, where we have 53 community schools that will now projected to grow for next year to 77, budget pending in that sense. And so I'll pass it to my Vice Chair, Ellie.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ellie Mitchell. I am the director of the Maryland Out of School Time Network, and we also serve as the backbone for the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools. I also serve as co-chair for the Maryland Education Coalition, and I sit on the executive committee for the Blueprint Coalition as well. Obviously this is all near and dear to my heart, and January 2025 has had so many unexpected or maybe expected challenges to it already for all the areas in which we focus. So interested to have this conversation today, and I'll pass it over to Shalita.
Hi, my name is Shalita Jones. I'm a school-based speech language pathologist, currently working in a specialized school within the Montgomery County, within Montgomery County. So yeah, I think that's about it. That's where the majority of my work is within communication and language disorders. And so just kind of looking at that from a educational standpoint and educational impact, educational and functional impact. Let me just add that into as well. And I will pass that on to Dr. Grant.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Jessica Grant. I am a principal in Prince George's County Elementary School at a kindergarten through grade 5 comprehensive program. Pillar 4 really speaks to me because I am a community school. I have a growing multi-language community. It was 50 students when I first came on board as principal, and now I'm over 100. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about each month when we meet, I'm actually also thinking about how can I implement and use this information to make impact in my school community. So thank you all.
I'll go to our student member, Kadeem.
My name is Kadeem Bell, and I'm the student member on the board for Caroline County.
And Joe.
Hey everyone, I'm Joseph Mako. I am the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation, and also a member of the Accountability and Implementation Board, and previously was a elementary school principal of a community school.
Thank you. So today, I want to make sure that we know it's going to be some discussion with us as a Pillar 4 because a lot has come out around things that are part of the blueprint. Legislative session is in, and so we are going to start with our AIB updates and then kind of go through some discussions about the 3 areas that are in Pillar 4. And we really need to focus in also nearing the end of what do we need as follow-up updates from other work groups, other agencies, or even other departments in MSCE around what is a part of Pillar 4, which has our funding for special education and multilingual learners, talks about those that are part of community schools, which are in concentration of poverty areas. But we really want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to provide information back to AIB around maybe our concerns, our wonders, our notices around the funding that is currently being looked at for the blueprint. So we'll move over to the AIB updates.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. I am here I'm Lisa Armstrong, a policy analyst, to provide the Pillar 4 updates to the advisory committee members. I apologize that I'm not on camera. My camera is malfunctioning today. I'm going to provide updates and also wanting to let the committee know some things that the AIB is keeping an eye on. But first, I want to celebrate and uplift our member liaison from the board, Member Manko, because today was the joint meeting with the State Board of Education in person. And kudos to Member Manko for juggling both today. Their meeting ended not too long ago, and it was a long day. Lots of important topics were on the agenda. And I just want to thank Member Manko for always giving his time to Pillar 4. Member Manko, do you want to say anything about today's meeting?
No, I mean, we got a couple important updates. I think some topics that would be definitely of interest to this group, including a presentation on chronic absenteeism, a presentation around teacher recruitment and retention, especially with a focus on conditionally certified teachers. And then this is more relevant to Pillar 1, but a fairly lengthy discussion around early childhood mixed delivery. I think were the big kind of highlights. But it's always great to work with our partners at the State Board, and truly grateful for the leadership that we have across the state between Executive Director Heiss and Dr. Carrie Wright. I think we're moving in the right direction, thanks to all of the work from staff on throughout MSDE and on the AIB, and then of course all of our very, very dedicated and active community members, such as the individuals that serve on this advisory committee and give their time and energy and thought and effort to make sure that the blueprint's moving in the correct direction. So thank you, everyone.
Amazing, Member Manko. Thank you for that update. So the advisory committee members, as well as the viewers, are encouraged to watch the replay of the State Board joint State Board of Education meeting from earlier today. Okay, so here are some hiring updates at the AIB. We have currently filled the position for our Government Relations Director, and that is a timely role as we are now in session with the Maryland General Assembly. And we will be announcing a few more opening positions in the coming months. Adding to that, the AIB is closely watching the proposed legislation that is coming out to the General Assembly. There are some key bills that are still in the beginning stages of the legislative process that we are keeping an eye on. And we will let the members know when there are bills that are of particular interest that apply to your pillar. Also, lastly, wanting to let you all know that today in the joint board meeting, this is particularly relevant to Pillar 4. Both the State Board of Education and the AIB came together and reiterated their commitment to our multilingual immigrant population, and that our duty is to keep our students, all means all students, safe, and they are in agreement with this, and they publicly stated this today in light of current events. And I look forward to the discussion that will happen today in the committee. I feel like this is the perfect time, being the end of January, to regroup and level set so that the committee can have strong topics and discussion going into the spring. And that way we can end strong for the summer break. And of course, I'm here if there's any questions. And I will have one suggestion when you all break out or begin your discussion around topics. But those are the updates from the AIB.
Thank you so much. And so, the next part of our agenda is really just to talk about, the legislative session. As the supervisor of community schools, I am somewhat shocked and a little bit disappointed that the original thing that went out about continuing schools for FY 27 has now frozen. So next year for 26 will be the last year that we will identify schools. And I only say that because we would have had probably our last group that would have been able to meet the requirements of the 55%. And so that freeze is probably right at a cusp of intersectionality. And so I will explain why I bring that impact up, because Montgomery County, along with PG County and some other ones that are close to DC, are very big locations for federal employees. And with the current climate in our country, it is going to probably impact some of our residents' employment, especially some of our parents. And so I feel that that might have been something, as I'm always foreshadowing and looking a little, at least 2 years down forward, that we probably should have finished out maybe for FY 27 and then pause anything else we needed after that, because I feel it's going to be somewhat of a trickle down. And so we just want to be mindful of the legislation that is currently out there. I do know, as for community schools, that they are focusing in on looking at a 3-point plan of reviewing what it means to be a community school. And that's to look at improving our implementation, enhancing the collaboration, and investing in evidence-based strategies. And that's pretty much what they're looking at for the blueprint. And I just know for community schools, not only for my LEA, but for the state, we were already on this track. And so it would have been great to know that we were on this track at what we had originally had been provided in 2019 once community schools started. And so that is one of the things that I did want to bring up, because I don't think we necessarily understand the impact of some of the other things as much as Maryland is going to try to protect. That is still a trickle down because of our locale to many federal agencies that could potentially have employment impacts. And so I think that that will actually increase poverty in some of our areas, or some of the people who now would be on reduced. And so I wanted to just bring that into the space to see if it was anything else that others had heard around community schools that are concerns. I know the per pupil allocation reduction in some of the proposed bills right now. The Senate has a bill, the House has a bill. Also shows a slight adjustment in both of them. And so I just want to make sure that we are aware of these things that are coming up that would impact one part of Pillar 4. And then the biggest part is with the professional learning adjustment that then changes the allocation across all of the parts of the blueprint, which then creates that reduction.
Yeah, Hope, can I jump
Yeah.
in here? And
Sure.
I know I'm in the advocacy role, and I understand that we're here to talk about blueprint implementation, and there's a fine line of what our role is. But I'm gonna try to just speak in factual statements. And then I also want to address, and maybe a little bit even more of an opinionated fashion, the 3-point plan discussion, and why it's important that when we come across these plans, and I know there was some discussion with, let me start with the funding picture. So first of all, I was part of many, many people who sat through and watched all of the briefings in the Pillar 4 work group in terms of how the blueprint was constructed and what the point of the blueprint was. And the ambition of the blueprint and the phased in increases was to get to this excellence in education and to add those added resources to our highest concentration of poverty schools, because what the research said was that as the concentration of poverty increases, the outcomes for students decreased. And the research said that there would need to be these additional resources directed to schools in order to change those outcomes. We are starting in that trajectory. There was a hearing recently where MABE and PZAM and others talked about the progress that was being made, and particularly through the community school model. We see that there's both academic gains and there are also gains around culture and other ways that this is happening. But we're just at the beginning. And so it is really disconcerting that we would stop or freeze or roll back anything that we are doing right now when we have not yet reached our goal. The goal has not been reached. The realization, the ambition of the blueprint has not been reached. So and again, just speaking in factual information, and actually the whole picture of it is a little unclear. And one thing that we may ask of the AIB or of DLS is a really clear chart of what these cuts actually mean in each of the categories. So there is the collaborative learning time that then decreases the foundation and impacts all of the weights. I thought that the MSEA testimony this morning was very compelling. And if you go back and listen to that, that has a lot of good detail in it. So you have that. You have the freeze on the per pupil, and that is very hard to calculate outside of the world of the of DLS, because every school is at a different level of phase-in, and so you actually would need to know the school's data in order to actually get the number of what they would be missing going forward. So it's very hard to calculate, but we have good estimates that put this at somewhere in the realm of about $500 million. And when you add it up over time, it could be even more than that. And combined with the collaborative learning time freeze or removal, it's close to $3 billion that we're talking about over the next 4 to 5 years. And it's an incredible amount of money. And I think that the other place that's being cut is the Consortium for Coordinated Community Supports. That is supposed to expand access to behavioral health, which has been identified as one of the huge needs. And so it just feels really disconcerting, and it feels like we're undermining the actual ambition of the blueprint with these changes. The impact of this is going to go largely to our school districts that have the highest concentration of English language learners, special ed, students that compensatory ed, and then the highest concentration of poverty schools. That's just the reality of it. It's just the factual reality of it, because that's where the cuts are coming from. And so Prince George's County, Baltimore City, Montgomery County, because they have large numbers, these districts are going to be hit disproportionately by these cuts. The 3-point plan came as a surprise to people in Maryland who are digging into community schools because number one, as Hope said, we were already on that track. The Maryland Center for Community Schools, it had been established and it's creating all these professional cohorts, and we have lots of things happening with that. Derek's office was beginning to be staffed up and they were starting to do really good work. And so the 3-point plan is just maybe just an extension of what was already happening, but it was also not created in consultation. Besides, MSDE was part of some of the consultation, but the other organizations that were consulted were all outside of Maryland and not local. And I don't understand why we don't consult with and advise with the folks who are doing the work on the ground already. And this happens a lot. So yeah, it's a pretty tough time. And I encourage everybody to go back and listen to the board meeting this morning and hear those testimonies. And there's some fact sheets that we've been working on with the Blueprint Coalition, and I'm happy to share those with anybody who wants them. I know they've been going out through Strong Schools, and we're going to be sending some out too. And we'll be this will be the topic of our MD4CS Coalition meeting this Friday at 12:30. So for those who are interested in any of those things, it's emitchell@mostnetwork.org.
Anybody else around that one before I pivot to another area of the pillar? Okay, so the next one is also when we look at what is an adjustment for the Blueprint funding. One of the things I know in my county, we're in the middle of budget season. Other LEAs have just started their proposed operating budgets. And so one of the things I think that will be coming forth would be a lot of LEAs asking the expectations in the of the school district itself supporting the Blueprint, because some of the things are coming up as requirements, but some LEAs do not have the funding to cover at the scale, it seems. It also goes to us tying into, I think it's Pillar 2, where we think about the staffing and finding the diverse teachers and leaders to actually implement and take Blueprint to another level. So I just want to touch base real quick and see if it's anyone else that has received any information or has any thoughts about legislatively from our side also in Pillar 4, as we're looking at this Blueprint, maybe a more streamlined coordination of all of our pillars. I think at an earlier meeting, I mentioned like us getting together across pillars, even if we might need to break up into one person from every pillar, create a team to come together and just kind of talk about where are the cross areas that we think, and then we share that across all of the pillar committees. Because I think there is some work that maybe could, and I'll say this, support budget and being fiscally responsible at the same time, making sure that we coordinate things so nothing is left without the support needed. And Joe, I don't know if that's already something that's been brought up about getting even tighter with our coordination across all of the pillars as well as the committee members. Anybody?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just piggyback off what you were saying, I hope, about the collaboration piece. I know that at the end of the day, the majority of the conversation is going to be about funding, right? That's just where we are. This is the state in which we are. We want to fund, highly qualified teachers. We also want to fund resources to the community. But I do agree with that, with coming together with not just within our district, but maybe talking to other districts as well about like what is working for them. Because maybe even though larger districts like Montgomery County, PG County, Baltimore City, you know, they have a lot of individuals, but maybe at the smaller districts, they're finding more success. You know, and they may not get, you know, of course, they're not receiving as much funding as these larger districts, but maybe there are some ways in which we can collaborate or talk about ways in which there are resources. I know that in some districts, they are looking at, you know, not continue to fund non-publics, you know, based on a criteria. So, you know, they're trying to cut costs wherever they can. And so again, it's going to continue to be that conversation. Okay, well, how that means how can we support if you cut it from the non-publics, how is that going to work for if they go back to the public schools? What supports are being given to the schools in order to, you know, for the students that may need that specialized school or that specialized attention. Because again, if you have someone who has a one-on-one dedicated aid, you know, that's another cost. If you have a classroom that, you know, a lot of children who have special needs, but it's like maybe 25, obviously a teacher can't or should not be, you know, allowed to, in per se, to teach all of those students because there are specialized instructions, especially when it comes to special education. So, you know, again, talking with other districts, other LEAs about what success, and maybe we can come to a common ground or maybe implementing some of these things because we know at the end of the day, like the funding, it's a tricky conversation, right? It's a very tricky conversation. And so it could propose that we do have this funding that is cut. And then once we don't have that funding that is cut, then what are we going to do? You know, I don't want us to be on the end where we are saying, okay, the funding is cut. Now we're kind of lost. Like, let's be proactive now into talking with other individuals about like the success stories as far as like resources. And like you were saying, Hope, like coming in with the other pillars about, you know, diversifying the teachers and early education, and also the resource and special education. And yeah, to kind of get to a ground where we're not just like our hands are kind of cuffed when they potentially may approve this bill and it may the funding is cut, you know, off the break. So it's like, you know, we got to have those conversations and be a little bit more proactive in that stance.
Dr. Grant, were you about to say something?
Just wonderings, because then my thought is, if funding is cut, then everything requires funding for human capital, funding for purchasing services for support of students. I mean, most certainly can look at the option of grant writing and see if there is a possibility around that, if that's an option. But if the funding is cut, it just puts you in such a negative space that it's really hard to find ways to move forward in some of these aspects because it requires so much to accommodate breakfast and lunches for students. It requires so much to accommodate community school coordinator position who is out trying to get grants and do things to help support students and turnaround services. So I just have a lot of wonderings of how do we even try to find other proactive ways to combat what may happen.
Yeah,
I was about to say, I'm kind of with you because as you guys were speaking, my wondering is also thinking of the blueprint as it's for the state of Maryland. And it's actually, I think, causing even more competition between LEAs to staff and get those high quality candidates. So then I started wondering, is it a way to do like blueprint positions and how are they like we were trained from the state level, what this means when you get to your LEA that you're going to go to, so that the people already know what the expectation is around that role directly from the state. Because I feel we will then at least have somewhat of an equal playing field around all LEAs in the state being able to understand this heavy lift. And in some places it's now, you know, you always hear the phrase unfunded mandate. And we don't want that. We do know that this mandate is showing progress and it's actually showing positive trajectory for our students. And so how can we keep our momentum going? Ellie, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, no, I just wanted to add that, you know, part of the difficulty of talking about this is the details. And the good news, I guess, if there is good news at this point, is that your funding for your coordinators is not going to change. Those personnel grants are going to remain the same. Like Hope said, there may not be new schools brought on. I'm not sure where that is in the legislation. I have to look at that actually. It could be that you would still get personnel grants, but not meet the per pupil. In the out years, if you're school qualified. So I'd have to get clarity on that actually, Hope, is unless that's like written directly into somewhere. But
From what our CFO's got, 26 is fine, 27, no more identifying schools, and the freeze on per pupil as well.
okay. So at least what you have existing right now is going to be supported by the ongoing funding. I think that, again, it was not the intent, though, of the blueprint to stay at that level. The part of what you get when you phase in that per pupil is, for example, the comptroller just put out a report on childcare and access to childcare in Maryland. And one of the bright spots that she was highlighting is that community schools are actually offering more after school programs. They're offering after school programs in part by using the concentration of poverty grant per pupil funding. But she listed 222 community schools offering that service out of the 600 plus that we have in the state. We're not going to get to 600 if we don't add. We're not going to get to 600 being able to offer that critical support to families, that after school space. And after school is not a nice to have, it's a need to have. And it's been shown, research, I have research I can show you that says that you put those kids in after school program, on high quality after school programs for extended period of time, it's going to help you close the achievement gap on math in particular. So
I can say, Ellie, I just want to add to your thought. I have several after school programs that are funded through community school budget here in my school. And my students were at 5% math proficient for years. We are finally at 11%. That is amazing to see that in 1 year, because we're meeting with students after school and spending time with them through academic programs, as well as Lego STEM programs, and expanding their mind. This year, our data is showing that it's going up again because of the funding that's been provided and the resources we can now give to these students. And so I just wanted to add to that is very true.
I'm so heartened to hear you say that. But like, that's the point. That was the point of this funding. That was where we were going. And that is how you change the trajectory of outcomes for students, is by bringing that full service community school, which includes that after school component, into play. And we just won't get there in the new dynamic that has been created. And I realize it is a budget crisis, and that compromises need to be made. But just the fact that these are the resources that are designed to go to the students who need them most, who have been most underserved historically and underfunded historically. And we're trying to reverse a trend. It takes a generation to do that. It takes that investment. And so again, that's just one example, I think, of one of the services that it's actually something that comes up in community schools needs assessments quite a bit. And what are the other things that come up in community schools needs assessments? Housing supports, and behavioral health.
Yep.
And again, where are we gonna, I know housing is a separate issue, but the behavioral health was another piece we were investing in. Maybe we didn't like the delivery but we have to not use the implementation challenges, as somebody said today, to back away from the challenge of solving that issue and investing in the design.
So also with that, when you talk about backing away in the design, I think one of the ones that this speaks to, and it kind of goes back to Shalita, are students with disabilities and what we were supporting with that funding to support the needs of not only things that came from COVID, but just what we're seeing now as we have more research around how to actually support. And then going into in our same pillar around those behavioral services to students around mental health. I saw a podcast recently where the person said, before we jump to an IEP, have we addressed the trauma? Because one of the things a lot of times that we are probably missing is to go through the protocol of figuring out what is happening with them mentally and behaviorally before we immediately jump to think it might be the need for an IEP. And so in our pillar, one of the things that has a lot of great work in it is having mental health coordinators. I know I get to work closely with the one that we have in Montgomery County, and just the facilitation and providing the resources and connecting 160,000 students to the different resources. Well, we have 211 schools. Is very powerful because a lot of times you don't look for the resource until you need the resource, but to know that we have structured ourselves through this position to support people to find where it's at when it does come to that time. It's something that I hope we don't impact or they don't feel that is not working, because I think across in many different areas, the one thing right now that we, if anything, is mental health is finally somewhat in line with physical health and your regular healthy kid routines of going to the pediatrician or going to your doctor to take care of your physical body. I think we're now coming around to an area where people understand taking care of your mind as well, and your wellness and your mental state. And so when we look at the budget going into FY26 and we're thinking about who we would like to have come and speak to us for February through July, what is standing out for you all? I know we originally did want someone from the multilingual learners work group to come, similar to how we had the special education group come. We would, I already do have confirmations from 2 people to come next month for us to focus in on multilingual learners. But when we think about the March, April, May, June, July, where are some other ones so we can go ahead and start sending out those invitations like the end of this week, next week, to get people already scheduled?
So some of this would take a little bit of additional investigation, but I know the special education work group is coming to the end of their mandate, and will be coming up with a list of recommendations. So I think potentially reaching out to Liz Zogby and seeing if she would come and present once the recommendations are available, and talk about why they're recommending certain things, what the implications are, I think would be timely.
Great. That's a good one. I know we also wanted to get a update from Derek Anderson, who's the executive director for community schools, to give us an overview of next year and what the expansion will look like. And even if we don't have the report on the poverty indicators, if someone can talk just generally around where they started with those poverty indicators and where they think that would be moving forward, that could be at the same meeting. Is there anything else? I know we also talked about one time the related service providers and how this might be impacting them. And we can probably tie that into the same day that we do the follow-up from the special education work group for the recommendations.
I would even push it. Did you said somebody from the mental health? Did you say?
Oh, so maybe someone to speak around the mental health piece?
Yes, because I mean, just going back on what you were saying before we segue into this one, you talked about the trauma, and we know that the body keeps count, and we also know that behavior is communication. So it'll be good to kind of speak to them first when it comes to like the trauma, because I know again, there's been a lot of the trauma, and then how does that correlate into not necessarily like them needing special education, but maybe like more supports, or maybe what are they seeing, right? Because if they do have some level of trauma, we're going to see that in their academics and their social skills and in their functioning skills. And so what data is supporting the justification, or maybe what are the trends that they're seeing? And so that would be great to have that maybe before the related services, because that maybe can provide some insight into what they're seeing when they're actually servicing students with disabilities. And are they working collaborative? Because again, we have, just like everybody's saying, funding, 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 but as related service providers, we're also tasked with or taxed with a lot of paperwork too, in order to justify our funding. And so how does that kind of correlate with maybe on the front end of receiving that specialized support, in addition to, you could still utilize the related service providers in the school, but not have them on your caseload, but we're seeing a high amount of students. We also are in meetings. We also, we have to meet with different people. We also have the documentation piece. So I read a study the other day and said that one of the highest things, especially for speech language pathologists, is the documentation and just not having the time to collaborate. And so how can we support? How can we put them in positions where they're at the table before it comes to diagnosing them with a disability? But it could just be some trauma that's surrounding it, and then it's showing up in their academics or functional skills, and so we need to support them beforehand.
And a good group to do that is we can try to see if the CHRC with the consortium grant, if they have from their first year group from last year, any data that they can come and present to us about what were those evidence-based strategies that have been working for those that were awarded those grants, and how are things going with the implementation of that.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, because it just sparked some different avenues, and I know that we're like focused on the groups, but also just like how we classify these behaviors, because we know that there's a disproportionate amount of students when it comes to either suspensions or in special education, and a lot of it is centered around behavior. And so some of the things that we may look at is disrespect or the insubordination. And so those are all like ego based, right? And so we have done a lot of research, and we have put a lot of money into culturally responsive teachers, so school leaders. But also, let's also look at the data when it comes to the student's perspective, right? So, that could be another talk. I know that all of this requires funding. I get it. I understand it. But it's also may help us in the long run to kind of see kind of where we are, to give us that baseline in order to continue to support the student and see if there's ways that we can help them. I know there are always like kind of groups out there, but just wanted to support the students in the best way we can in all capacities.
And then I think another one, we were going to ask students to come and just kind of give us their thoughts about what they have seen in being a community school or receiving Or not even even if they don't receive the services, but how is it in their school having additional mental health services or behavioral services or the connection to trusted adults that help with their belonging. So that could be something that we tie in on that same day, just to have the full conversation from those that should be receiving the support compared to those that are providing it. Is there any other ones that we're thinking of?
One topic I would be interested in exploring a little bit, Hope, and I think Ellie is the perfect conduit for this, but you know, I when she was speaking about just the after school programming and the benefits of after school programming in these community schools, it would be I would be interested in hearing from some of these comprehensive, high quality after school programs that are operating at community schools and hearing more about how they're structuring the after school time, what they're doing with the students during that time in terms of academic support and enrichment, what the program looks like, and then I think most importantly, how they've gone about funding these programs, because I think a portion of this is through the per pupil grant, but I think in a lot of cases they're going through and braiding additional funds, whether it be 21st Century Community Learning Schools grants or grants through entities like the Family League in Baltimore City. So, you know, just understanding a little bit more about the fund, what the overall cost is, what the funding mechanism is in different places across the state. And I think some of that will help us, as Ellie was saying, trying to figure out like what would need to be done in order to make this more broadly available. And would help, I think, you know, public members that are looking at this that are like thinking, oh, I would like to have more comprehensive after school services at my school. What would I need to do? Who would I need to talk to? How would I need to advocate in order to make that happen?
Definitely. I know a lot
But
of
defer to
early
Ellie
age-
because she's the expert. But
I can definitely deal with the funding part. I would want to work. We could definitely also try to find some of the community schools who are using CPG funds. That would be
Sure.
a great, yeah. But it is definitely a braiding. I always tell people you can get started with just using after school meals and volunteers, and then move from there to build up to a broader,
Yeah.
more comprehensive
I mean, it
program.
would be it would be great to even hear from some of those programs because like that are just starting it out, because I think you're absolutely correct. You know, and I think to build on Shalita's point from earlier, I think some of this is clearly so much of this is about funding, but some of this is also trying to figure out if there's workarounds or creative ways that we can make things happen for our kids, you know, in the absence of funding. And some of that, like you were just saying, Ellie, is, you know, could be as simple as developing the structure, enrolling kids, and then finding a means of either getting volunteers or paying parents, you know, stipends in order to provide services after school in your school community.
And you kind of brought up something there because I think one of it's two things that come to my mind. One is philanthropy, because what I've seen is a lot of schools that might be in their first year, for instance, and they don't have the per pupil allocation, still able to secure funding to support an after school program, whether that be coding, orchestra, violin, ballet, because you have these community school coordinators and MCPS, their liaisons, who literally are finding the grants, engaging, writing the letters, just saying, hey, I got a group of 15 kids. And so some of it is that natural advocacy, and then also touching base with the philanthropy side of getting people to understand how they can support. I know my community school liaisons, I'll give them a shout out. They're great at finding grants from, you know, $1,000, $2,000, but they already have, like, I told them as a teacher and an administrator, we always had a wish list So when any additional money just happened to be released, we didn't have to get ready. We stayed ready. And always had it kind of tiered out like, hey, if they tell us they're giving us this much money, we can cover these 3 things on our list. And so I think that they have gotten into this, and a lot of our community school coordinators around the states are building those relationships to ensure that they can have a well-versed after-school and out-of-school time program. The other thing that came to mind when you were speaking about the out-of-school time organizations is I know a lot of my counterparts who are supervisors have created these resource fairs and made sure that any and all were invited, and it was not a classism or a reputation only, like you've been around for 25 years. It could be an organization that just started 2 months ago, but they have the passion and advocacy to support one particular school. And so they've been really working to give people the opportunities to support the community schools in line with the needs assessments and implementation plans. And I think that's the success, because the one thing I would say as someone who supervises community schools is to know it's a strategy, it's not a program. And when people understand it's a strategy, it's so many ways to implement a strategy when you don't think it has to be a set scripted program like it might be with a curriculum. And I think a lot of times we miss out on some of that as well. Ellie, you were going to share?
No, I think it's a good topic, and if we can put it in the schedule, we can make it happen, and I'm happy to find the speakers in addition to myself.
Okay. And so right now for next month's meeting, I know what we have is looking at the multilingual learner part. So that would be our guests and LEA work groups, maybe even MSDE, to discuss more about that from the blueprint perspective. And then we would just need to figure out, looking at people's calendars about March through July of what opportunities, or June, July, what opportunities would work best on what months. Because we want to make sure it's aligned to people's schedules as well. So if you all have any additional people that you would like to invite, please just send their names to me and Ellie, and we could, send them out a personal invitation to come and get them on the agenda so we can have those agendas ready and out to everybody ahead of time. I only have one more question. Actually, Lisa from the AIB, I know you said you would reach out to us about legislation that is aligned to our pillar. Do you usually know like how far in advance we would get that?
We usually give a preliminary update in the middle of session,
Okay,
particularly around crossover. We usually have a good idea of the impactful bills at that time. And then we can provide the a final update when at the end of session.
and then I'm always available to go to any meetings, or if somebody wants me to go and speak on behalf of Pillar 4 or to support the work that I do. Because I think in the end it ties into great progress in building capacity and not dependency that will literally create thriving communities off of what we're doing in the work. At this time, is there anything else that anybody wanted to add or we wanted to include for any future topics that we did not discuss? Kadeen, is there anything from your perspective as a student that you think we might have missed or that you would like to see that is addressing like multilingual learners or students with disabilities or community schools? or in mental health services?
I just have a question about so my school, we're not a community school yet, but we have a lot of English language learners at my school.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that federal funds are getting paused right now, which is kind of crazy, but every other school in my county is a community school. So with everything being paused out of all of the schools, is my school gonna suffer more, or is there anything that's gonna prevent them from getting the help that they need?
Actually, that's a good question that we could pose to the people who come, because the way you stated that alone is nailing it right on the head of what does this mean if you're not a community school, or if you have a high multilingual learner population, what does this look like with the impact directly to the school with implementing what is the requirement for Blueprint? So great question. I'm writing it down.
The greatest impact to your school is going to come from the collaborative time removal. And that takes the base down and then the multipliers. So if you have a high English learner population, that was actually something Sean spoke to today that I didn't even fully understand the implications of until I heard him say it, Sean Johnson from MSCA, that yeah, that we really need to figure out a way to hold harmless on that. Although I think that then defeats the purpose of balancing the budget. So I'm not sure how we're gonna get to a compromise on this in this legislative session. I'm hoping that the legislators and the governor and people think through their revenue options, and we come out in a different place than what the proposal is right now. So, because yes, it would disproportionately hurt your school if they go through with that change.
And then we know we were letting the governance work, Pillar 5 get up off the ground. And maybe that could be what we finish the summer with, is by then just getting an update of where they're at around governance and legislation part for them to give us a update as well. Anything else? If not, we believe in always preserving our time. So if not, I would say thank you guys. We have all we need to start planning out for the remainder of the year. I'll make sure to get information out to you all as we start building out the agendas. So if you have contact or information for someone, you can send it directly to us and we can make sure to see who it would be to reach out. Would it be me? Or would AIB have to reach out, or Joe, because he might have a different side for being on the board. And so I thank you guys for participating tonight. And I hope you have a nice rest of your week. And the one thing I tell everybody in my emails I will share with you guys is stay hydrated and don't give from your cup, but give from the overflow on your saucer. Make sure to take care of yourself pretty much.
I like that. Thank you.